The last part of Daniel Pink's drive is referred to as the Type I toolkit. Type I is really synonymous with his belief of Motivation 3.0, which is a change from the Motivation 2.0 that was based on rewards. And so he offers, really in a more blog type setting, a few different ideas about how to awaken your motivation. And so he offers some suggestions like taking a flow test, which is an idea from Csikszentmihalyi, where you periodically throughout the day chart your level of engagement and enjoyment in an activity and how much you're being challenged, so that you can go back and review what's bringing you challenge and enjoyment and what are those activities that are not, that are kind of taking away your energy. He talks about the idea of asking big questions, which ties in with his belief in purpose, and then following up with smaller questions underneath each one of those in order to make those purpose-driven questions a reality. So he has a section on here where he implores people to try a few different things to improve their organization or company or school. So one of those ideas is try 20% time with training wheels. 20% time is where you just get to work on those things that you're passionate about, trying to find your own answers to all of those items. And so he says, if you're uncomfortable with 20% of the time, do it with 10% of the time, do it with 5% of the time. Just try it out till you get to that point. He also suggests doing an audit, autonomy audit, where you check and see how many decisions you're giving yourself, and also if you're running a company or a school, for other people. He talks also about the idea of providing Goldilocks groups, where groups are diverse, they work together, use their skills on a task that they can complete that's within their range. So those are all different ideas about that can be applied to schools some way in order to kind of set up the organization for advancing your motivation. Then he has a section specifically with schools, and one of the primary things he talks about that I loved is this homework checklist of, if you do have to give homework, think about this: are you offering autonomy? Are you promoting mastery? Does the assignment promote mastery? And do the students understand the purpose? I am, in recent years, have become an advocate of not having any homework. And I think the idea of daily homework really can crush motivation. And so these three items there are really, I think, essential to ask every time that we are giving homework, because there are just things that don't necessarily fit inside the course of a day, but they really can crush motivation if kids don't understand why they're doing something, if it doesn't feel like they're advancing towards mastery, and they have no control over what that assignment is. Another idea that he proffers is the idea of do-it-yourself report cards, where they set up some ideas about what they'd like to improve their skills on, and then at the end of the term, or whatever your grading period is, you have a conversation about how you're advancing towards those skills. And again, that promotes a little bit of autonomy and purpose that they're learning with that. And while those things seem radical, getting rid of homework and do-it-yourself report cards, I would say, like, our grades that we currently have that exist in a lot of classrooms, like, don't work either. They follow exactly what Cohn has talked about, that we are punished by rewards and kids are only doing them to get points. And so the idea of dramatically changing how we grade is an interesting idea, and I'd love to play around with that more and convince some teachers that I work with just to try it and see what happens, because everything is just kind of an experiment when we try something new. He mentions a few different Type I schools, and one of those schools was the Tinkering School, which I have done for my week 6 discussion 3 investigation into that. I just love the idea of letting kids play. Theirs is not in a school setting, but I think those same ideas can apply to our classrooms in some measure, where we let kids play with ideas and let them follow their passions and see where it takes them, kind of regardless of what that goal is. He offers a reading list and some suggestions too for, like, business leaders that lead a Type I kind of mindset. In the reading list, he mentions Cone book, he mentions Dweck's book, he mentions Csikszentmihalyi High. So a lot of the overlap here that we're seeing in Drive is, he talks about Dweck, he talks about Cone, he talks about Csikszentmihalyi High. These are all things that we've talked about within our class. But the overwhelming thing that I got after kind of putting everything together for Drive and really this whole class is to say, are we sharing this with our students? Because if they don't understand what we're trying to do, if they're not a part of that discussion, it's going to be really hard to convince them. And I went to this quote from page 16 of Csikszentmihalyi's book. To overcome the anxieties and depressions of contemporary life, individuals must become independent of the social environment to the degree that they no longer respond exclusively in terms of its rewards and punishment. To achieve such autonomy, a person has to learn to provide rewards to herself. And I think everything that we've done in this classroom, in this class and talking about motivation, really fits in well with that. But I don't think that we're letting kids in on that conversation about how to live these full, fulfilling lives. And I think that that's our next responsibility, is to take this information and make the students aware of this. In Cone's book, he talks about some suggestions for how to set up the classroom: allow active learning, give a reason for the assignment, elicit curiosity, set an example, and welcome mistakes. Those are all things that I think we can start to play around with to find just new outcomes for our kids. But I think we have to include the kids in that conversation. That's one of the things that Cone mentions too. As we make a change, it shouldn't just be unilateral. It should be a discussion with the students. But I don't know that me as a teacher, when I had a classroom, that I was necessarily ever asking them to live meaningful and fulfilling lives by finding intrinsic motivation and ignoring rewards and pushing ourselves to be better toward a larger purpose. And I think those are all the ideas that are kind of put together here from these 3 books that I read for this unit. And I think that if I did more of that, I would have had a greater sense of motivation, purpose, and developing students that were really autonomous as they left the building. Bits and pieces of it here and there or whatever, but not a unified version. And so that idea is really going to drive me as I work with teachers and students next year, is how do we build some of these great things in there? And I think a lot of it is just letting go a little bit and giving up some of our control that we have, with the idea that I'm going to give up a little bit, but I'm going to ask them to do a little bit more. I'm going to have them have a say in their grade, so that it's not just about points. And they have to really honestly reflect on that. And in my experience, students are more critical than we as teachers are when they do some self-evaluation. And so I think we can rely on them to be honest about their skill development.